Good afternoon. The Finance Committee special meeting is called to order at 3:02 on Tuesday, June 20th. All members are present, that being Alderwoman Finlayson to my right and Alderwoman O'Neill to my left. At this time, I'll accept a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
At this time, I'll accept a motion to approve the meeting minutes of June 7th, 2023.
Approval of the minutes from the June 7th meeting.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. My understanding is the reason for the special meeting is that we have some fund transfers in closing out the fiscal year 2023 fourth quarter. And the first one we have in front of us is fund transfer 5-23. And is there a representative from finance to speak to it? And do we want APD as well? Or I'd like to acknowledge that we do have the police in the audience. So no, you're just here to listen. Okay.
Come on.
All righty. Jody, Director Dickinson.
Yes, FT 523 is a request to transfer budget funds within the police department's budget. And then most of this was upon request of the police department. There are things in certain accounts they want to purchase, and they have some extra spending authority in some of the other accounts. Now, I think we've attached, you have the detail? It's not on here. Oh, it's in the, if you look in the little box that's on the FT in the center.
Little box on the
With the explanations, it's small type when you're looking at it on a PDF.
Oh, yeah,
That's the itemization
Yes.
of the request.
Yes, it was a little bit difficult for me to understand because usually you set up these as revenue coming in and expenses, but this is a transfer
This is
within
just
the
moving money within the police department itself from one account to another.
Mm-hmm. And that basically makes them, are they closed out then for fiscal year 2023, their budget?
When you say closed out, what?
I mean, is that final budget?
This will be the last fund transfer that we'll consider. Where the actual spending ends up will depend on year-end transactions that are still pending. For instance, if we get invoices in, even in July and August, we get invoices in to pay. And also procurement card transactions have not all been recognized as well at June 30. So there will be some actual expense activity after this date. But this will be the last budget change. These three FTs and the SA will be the last budget changes of the year.
Sorry, I'm hogging questions here, but I do have a question for the police captain, and if you could, when we do these, or when they're done, then do you use them for knowledge on how you will budget for the following year? In other words, you know, budgeting 101, do you say, oh, wow, we didn't need much clothing, so we'll go in? Is this helpful to you as far as data on where?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Acting Captain Dave Miggett from the police department. So we're, we use this year end to get a look at next year, even though we've already submitted the budget.
Yeah, right.
It gives us a better, plan as to where expenses are projected to be. I mean, it's one of many things that we look at in figuring out where we're going to stand next year, so that ideally, as time goes on, these fourth quarter transfers get smaller and smaller, so we're not moving as much. But there's always unexpected things that come along. So,
thank you very much for that answer. Questions?
Yes, thank you.
Alderwoman Finlayson.
Yes. Captain, my first question relates to the line items that deal with programs. But before I ask that question, traditionally we kind of hold back on some of our expenses until we make sure that the funding is there towards the end of the fiscal year. So is that what we're seeing now, that we didn't spend the funds early on in anticipation that we might not have enough funds to get us through?
Actually, a majority of the movements were for,
Not related to these movements, but in general, I'm asking.
in general, we do the best we can in budgeting our expected expenses. And we get quotes where we can, as much as we can, so that we're hitting, we have a firm number to shoot for next year. Sometimes we'll end up with, for example, the amount that we budgeted for, say, Comcast for connections to cameras and things like that. We've been working with MIT. They've been going out and replacing the infrastructure with city-owned fiber so that we're able to close accounts by a private vendor, and then we end up with some extra money that we can then put towards something that comes up during the year that we, back in September or December, we said, well, we don't have money for that right now, but let's see what we have towards the end of the year. And so we kind of have a running wish list. And then as we get to the end of the year, we then prioritize those things to address them, as we can financially with what we have.
Okay, so we are seeing some of that in these movements.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My next question relates to programs and special programs. Are we increasing or simply moving from one program initiative to another? You see where I'm talking? There's a 15,000 and a 98,000 that deal with programs.
Yes, so let's see, we had money from programs that we were putting towards the purchase of new firearms.
That was going to be my next question, so.
Yeah, we budgeted a certain amount for that, but as time has gone on since we got the quote, costs have increased, and so we were able to take some money from something that didn't end up incurring as much of an expense to put towards that, as well as some money from one-time use funds from finance, so that we can get that order in. Our weapons are overdue for replacement, and so it's the weapon, a new holster, obviously, to fit the new weapon. And that's times, 130 basically, so that we have replacements on hand if anything malfunctions.
So we're not reducing any programs or eliminating any programs? These
No.
are just- Okay.
No, ma'am.
And one of my questions was going to be about the firearms. And then the other dealt with contract services. And is that, again, just funds that, from one area where we didn't use the funds and we're moving it to contract services where we need some more money?
Yes, we are moving that into, we've had some issues with the gates, the vehicle gates, as well as the pedestrian gates at the police department, and over the past probably few years. And so we've contacted Public Works, and they've had contractors come in, and they've been repairing what they can, but at this point, we need to, as if we can ideally get both of them replaced, do that. And if not, at least one of them replaced, because they're just not functioning properly. There's either a gate closing as a vehicle's going through, or communication with the card reader is not reliable. And so whether it's people trying to get into the lot or even getting out. So.
That's important.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm not challenging or even questioning the project, just wanting to know how we're moving money. And, I trust your department, to make the decisions on how to best use it. So that's not, I'm not questioning that at all. And what is R&M building?
Repair and maintenance.
Oh, okay. So that's on Taylor Avenue? Or
Correct. And let me see. So that was
Is the air conditioning working?
How long do we have? It's currently working okay. But yeah, that's a small overage for something that was, and most of that stuff is covered by Public Works, but from time to time, there's something that comes up that's specifically unique to the police department, and Public Works doesn't cover that if it's a need that we specifically have. So, and that's understandable because they'd have to be addressing specific needs for every department in the city.
Okay, thank you. I see Ms. Conley at the mic. Do you have something to?
I just want to add, if it helps, Katie Conley, Budget Manager, for the record. That 98,000, I'll let Captain correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that was a placeholder for state legislation, which Ms. McCoy and I'm sure others in the police department, as you well know, made incredible efforts to get funding in other ways or save funding. So that's actually a savings for us, and I'll defer
Okay,
to Captain if I'm
this is
incorrect.
in 23.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that was, thanks for reminding me. That was, as she mentioned, money that was set aside for state legislation expenses, but Ms. McCoy was able to get a state grant to cover a lot of that, if not all of it, so.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Conley. That ends my questions, thank you.
I was just thinking, it's really important for the police card readers to work, to get out. Do you have any questions, Alderwoman
Do
O'Neill?
not.
Okay. I'll look for a motion.
Madam Chair, I'll move approval of FT 523.
Second.
All,
I recommend a favorable recommendation.
all in favor, you second, yeah. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, next one we have is FT 6-23, which is the fire department. Chief, come on up. We'll have questions, right?
May I?
Okay, I just wanted to get the page. Alderwoman Finlayson?
I want to know how come you can take $100,000 out of salary and benefits?
So that's a question probably for me more so than for him.
Okay, let me ask you the question.
Just that in the budget, when we project out this year's actual results between salary and benefit lines, they have some excess, not a lot. That's not a lot for their budget. As you know, their salaries are really high in the millions and millions. So they have a little excess, and they wanted to spend it on these other efforts, and so we used it from their own budget. And some of this would be due to the fact that we have been able to give 2 pay periods worth of benefit holidays, so the city did not have to pay for health benefits for 2 pay periods. That's some of the savings.
Okay.
As well as other vacancies or other things that are impacting their salary and benefits lines.
So should we expect to see these savings in all the departments?
Each department would have, for that purpose, had some savings. Some of those would be offset by other over expenses, other expenses that were in excess of what they thought they were going to spend. For instance, if we have one, and we'll address this in the next one, where a couple of the employees changed their benefit elections, which made it a lot more expensive, and that offset any savings they had from this. So it depends on department. But in general, all departments had savings for that purpose, for that reason.
So did the department weigh in on how those savings would be allocated?
The fire department came to us to ask us for the monies for these other efforts, and except for the electricity, which is beyond their control, we're finding the gas costs citywide to be over budget this year. We had a big increase in our gas costs during the year, and that's impacted many departments. And so that one was beyond their control, but the others are initiatives that the department wants to spend funds on.
Do we have a citywide contract on copiers? Or is that determined by each department? I thought we had one contract.
Yes, we do have one contract. Each department pays their own costs. And the cost will depend on how they use it, if they use it for color copies, that type of thing. So each department's usage will vary. Some saved funds, some will overspend.
Thank you, Deputy. That ends my questions for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. I was curious about, I know it's only, what, $500, but I thought, we're in a paperless society, so it's kind of weird to see.
Not very paperless.
I was going to say, we're not very paperless at all.
Out there.
It'd be nice if it were.
Hasn't hit us at all, this, but I was just, what is hand, that software?
Sure. Carol Spriggs, Deputy Fire Chief. So the hand tevy program is something that our EMS division will be using specifically for our cardiac arrest patients. It's software that they can use to assist them in, for instance, I guess the best example I can give you is if they have a small child that's in cardiac arrest, some of the medications that they give are either weight-based or age-based. This hand tevy program will actually allow them to see those dosages right away instantly, and so they're not trying to calculate these things in their head on the fly under stressful situations. So that it's a program that's used in a couple other communities or a couple other counties, and it's been very beneficial for them, and so we felt that it was something that our provider should have as well.
Thank you very much. And I assume then in 2024, it's adequate funding?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Alderwoman O'Neill, any questions?
No questions.
All right, I'll entertain a motion for a favorable recommendation.
Madam Chair, I'll make the recommendation that we give FT 623 a favorable recommendation.
Do I have a
I'll
second?
second.
All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you.
Oh, thank you for being here. And so we have FT 7, which is a little complicated. Transportation. I guess Director Dickinson or
So for this one, I'll ask Katie Conley to come to the mic, because there's
There she
going to
is.
probably need to be some elaboration. This is the fund transfer that we compile every year for your consideration, where we see various departments going over budget in certain areas. We'll try to find the funding from other sources and do some shifting of the budget in the fourth quarter. We call it the fourth quarter transfer, to help departments get in line with their spending in line with their budgets. And there are many departments represented here.
But before you get into it, could you explain just the columns?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so, because usually the transfer froms are at the top, but
That's true. I hadn't noticed that, but yes, you're right. The transfer froms, those are the sources where we are taking the monies from.
Yep,
And,
yes.
and these are accounts. If you want me to address one each individually, the accounts within finance non-allocated that are intended for a particular purpose. In fact, for instance, the one that says other, it's $75,000. That's an amount that we budget for what we call the Viva Chop. At the end of every calendar year, employees who have an excess of annual leave can change that annual leave into an amount and put it into their Viva account. And that is a cost for the city. And we have this set aside here in case some departments can't absorb that cost in their individual budgets. So we have used this as a funding source, as we assume some of these departments would be going over because of their Viva Chop. And the contingency fund is where we took the net amount. The $100,000 for the Office of Law is something individual for the Office of Law, and you'll see that in their request. We're moving that within the Office of Law. And then the other two, the lines on the bottom there are for separate funds. On this FT, you see we have a grouping at the top for the general fund departments. The second request is for the self-insurance fund. They are having claims expense higher than what we had budgeted. So we need to increase their appropriation, and they have an adequate fund balance for that purpose. And then on the transportation side, we're just shifting some salary and benefits budget from one of their divisions to another.
Could I, and of course, this is going to come before City Council tonight. My concern is contingency just kind of being, included in all of this. And it looks like 349,500 is of contingency is being utilized. I think you said 100 of it would go to the Office of Law.
No. If you look underneath that, the Office of
Okay,
Law
I see now.
wants to use some funding from salaries and benefits
Okay.
towards another contractual effort that they're
Okay.
spending. I will say that we decided on contingency. Last year, I think when we did this, we came to you, we used police salaries, because there's a lot of turnover savings in the police department. But with this smaller number, we decided we'll just take it out of contingency. The year is almost over, and we don't anticipate any other major emergencies to come from contingencies.
Great, now she said that now.
Yeah, there's no definition of, in the code of what contingency is to be utilized for, is there?
No. I mean, typically, we've used it for winter storms, the tornado,
Yeah.
other emergency efforts.
Yeah, it's not like we have a contract with somebody and we have to explain the use of it. It's all in our court. Okay. And then self-insurance is another one that needs to be explained only because of what we use it for. Could you explain that more specifically?
So, as you know, when we're establishing the budget, and we have anticipated revenue sources, for the self-insurance fund, the only revenue sources that we have are coming from other funds. And at this moment in the year, we see that based on that initial estimate of what they would spend, we sent the funds over from the other funds, but that's not going to be enough to get them through the end of the year. That fund has significant reserves set aside, both in cash and liabilities, for the purposes of paying claims. They do have enough fund balance in their fund to pay this extra amount. What we're finding is we've had fewer workers' comp claims this year, but the ones that we have are paying out more than we had anticipated. So the anticipated expenses for those claims are outpacing what we had set in the budget.
Okay, so does self-insurance, and forgive my ignorant questions, does self-insurance carry over then to 2024? Or do we calculate it?
So for
Again.
24, we've already set the budget for 24. You did that a week or so ago.
Right.
And
Oh, we did.
that's utilizing mainly the fund transfers from the general fund and the other funds.
Okay, so it's all related.
Yeah, so it's already
Yeah.
set up. And then if at the end of the year,
Yeah,
in many years, we haven't had to spend the entire budget. In other years, we've had to add to the budget slightly.
okay.
And that budget is based on an actuary, their analysis.
Right, the reserves that we have set is based on, yes, and the expense side, the budget side is based on an actuarial estimate of what they think we're gonna pay out during a given year.
So along that lines, because I don't have it in front of me and I'm too lazy to pull it up, can you tell me what we budgeted for FY '24 for the self-insurance fund?
Yeah, hold on, I'll see if I can get it here.
Okay, lazy is maybe not the right word to use, but
Are you asking for the self-insurance fund?
Yeah, in 2024.
Yeah, I just didn't hear
what we
what.
budgeted for in 2024.
Well, I was going to follow up to ask if it was higher or lower. Some years we have more expenses in our self-insurance.
So this,
Claims, I should call them.
right, so we're using fund balance in '23 to pay for these additional expenses above what we originally budgeted.
Okay, so if, let me see if I can do this with
And
my.
are those all workman's comp cases or other, or is that confidential information or
So,
usually?
you mean for what we're asking now,
We pay our own insurance
for the request for 23?
ourselves.
No, the funds going out of the self-insurance fund, are those workers' comp?
Ourselves.
They're all kinds, workers' comp, general liability, and automobile liability claims that fall on the city.
Okay.
So it's all three, but based on our discussions, the issue with the overspending is on the workers' comp side, not on the general liability side.
Okay.
We have,
So my concern would be whether we actually funded it so that we're not in this exact same place next year.
so
did
we
we
funded it according to what the actuary gets an updated list of reserves and our estimates of what we think the settlement's going to ultimately be on those reserves. And then we add a 20%, no, 5%, right? A 5% cap, 5% amount to cover admin costs. And then that total is what we budget in the budget. So the actuary getting that updated information should be providing us with increased amounts.
Okay.
But they also see what we have in reserves. So it's kind of, depending on the reserve levels and what they anticipate we're going to have to pay out, they try to set that expense level at the right level. I will tell you that I'm going to have to add up some, give me a minute here.
I know, I was trying to, would you?
I'm not good at
I'll
this.
reiterate.
Yeah, thank you.
Hold on.
She's looking for.
Yeah.
It covers general liability, insurance liability, and workers' comp.
Everything.
But they have determined that the workers' comp is what has increased more than anything else. Is what we're-
Because of claims coming in or, right, okay.
Yes.
So in FY '23, the budget that we had set for the self-insurance fund was $2,581,000. For '24, it's $3,061,000. So the expense side has increased about $500,000.
Okay.
But again, those numbers came straight out of the actuary's report. So the actuary presumably is seeing that same trend on the claims and asking us to set aside more funds for it.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
So may I follow up? So this 349 will fill the gap in the self-insurance fund?
There's our best estimate about where it will end up at year end.
between now and
But as you know, we've got claims going on all the time, and some of them are nearing settlement, so something could happen in these next few days that would make that number higher. We just have to show that in the year-end amounts, that if we end up going over budget, why we went over budget, and show you that the fund balance within the self-insurance fund can handle that.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I do apologize. My dad's nurses are with him, so they're constantly calling. It's all good. I have another question about the Viva Chop. I can't even get it out, the Viva Chop. Is 75,000 the normal need at the end of the year? We negotiated this, and this is a negotiated item back in 13, I think.
Yes, and anybody who's got a Viva account is eligible to do this CHOP at the end of the year. We had, when I first started here, we had been setting the budget at about $100,000. We didn't end up using all that, and we've lowered the budgeted amount accordingly. But part of the reason is that some departments, because they have vacancy savings, can absorb the Viva Chop in their regular budget. So we don't give them any of that pocket of money, but we try to reserve some just in case departments need it for that purpose.
Okay, so this is actually less than what we've needed in the past.
Yes, and I can, if you wanted me to tell you what the total Viva Chop amount was for any year, I could give it to you. I'd have to look it up, though.
Well, I guess my question is, do we have more people, I don't recall whether they can still get in the Viva Chop or whether there was that one-time window.
No,
Back
anybody
when
who starts,
anybody
if they
can.
elect a Viva account, they can have that Viva Chop option at the end of the calendar year.
So it's still seen as a benefit to the employees. Yeah.
Instead of losing their unused time,
Right.
if they have that account, they can set this money aside.
Well, and then one more. Does the sick leave bank connect in any way, or can it? I know it doesn't now because we don't really have a sick leave bank. We have an ability for employees to contribute days to a bank. I guess my question, I'm accustomed to, in our system, in the education system, everybody in the system contributes a day to the sick leave bank. And then if members, teachers, principals have extended illnesses, they can apply and get days needed so they can get beyond their illnesses. So is there a way, or should there be a way, or is it I know it's negotiated, but should we be talking about a sick leave bank, and would that impact, I don't know what.
So I can tell you how we're doing it now. There is no sick leave bank. When somebody is in need of excess, they run out of their leave and there's a need and they want to reach out to the city workers, they work through HR, and HR contacts everybody and says, so-and-so would like some donations, who is willing, and then you respond to that email and fill out a form and sign it that you're willing to give up some of your leave that you've accumulated for that purpose. And the Viva accounts are separate investment accounts that are outside the city. Once the money goes into those accounts, they have to be held for the purpose for which they're there for, which is healthcare costs, post-employment healthcare costs. So those wouldn't be an option to help pay for any kind of sick leave bank. And as we're doing it now, the sick leave donations are on a voluntary basis. And about any other programs, you'll have to talk to the HR manager for that, because.
Well, I understand, and I know it's an item that would be negotiated, so, okay, thank you.
Okay, Alderman O'Neill, you have some, and then I have a.
Thank you. I have a question. I'm happy to see Director Johnson here about Stanton Center, and I realize that there are some overages, and along with all the other 10,000 things that you've done since you've been with us, is there a plan for lassoing the over expenses of departments? Either that, or you can sit at the table.
Good afternoon. For the record, Rosalind Johnson, Director of Recreation and Parks. Right now, there is not necessarily a plan. I say that because Stanton's part-time staffing was over last fiscal year, and they're over again this fiscal year. I think after we're coming out of COVID, there's been an increase of events, get-togethers, activities, community meetings. Stanton has become more of a hub for the community to get together, particularly on evenings and weekends, Friday through Sunday. And so in order to staff those events Friday through Sunday, we have to have our part-time staff come in and cover those events. And so that's where the overage is coming from. We cannot do events, but I don't think that would be the best solution for the community, per se. We also have a situation now where our full-time center supervisor is out for the next 3 months on paternity leave. So we'll also have to fill that void too.
Okay. I think if it has happened reoccurring year over year for the past several, can we take a look at those budget line items?
Absolutely. I think there's another challenge too, is that the rental fees go into the city's general fund and the staffing costs come out of our budget. So there is no balancing act, if you will. If we were to look at a different setup, and of course I kind of arrived very late during the budget time this year, but if we looked at a setup where those actual funds would come out of a different come out of the same pot where we collect those revenues, then it wouldn't be a burden on the general fund per se, and we would be able to track it a little bit better.
Okay, thank you. You're recognized, Jody.
Oh, Director Dickinson, sorry, I had my head down.
Yeah, I wanted to add that I agree. I think the next step is to look at how we're setting the budget. And we set it based on anticipated costs. But if program popularity is increasing and there's more people signing up for things or using the Stanton Center, then we're going to have to try to see if we can see that on the revenue side. There's more revenue coming in, and therefore we should be adding to the budget because there's more revenue coming in to try to match those. I have in the past done analysis to look at all of the Rec and Parks fees compared to the costs, and they currently are not covering all of their costs department-wide. But that could also be an opportunity to look at fees again and see if they need to be adjusted. If we think that Rec and Parks needs to break even on its programming, then we need to readdress the fees. There are costs, like administrative salaries and stuff, that wouldn't be covered by a program fee. So as the director said, I think we need to determine how to track the revenues with the expenses, so when activity increases, that we identify a need for a budget increase earlier in the year.
Thank you.
And actually, I was speaking specifically to rentals. Fundamentally, I just don't believe that Recreation and Parks should pay for itself. I think it's a service to the community. But the rentals are a different piece. Should the taxpayers offset the cost of my child's 5th birthday party, for example? No, they probably shouldn't. But should the residents offset the cost of a community meeting? Probably so. So I think there are different categories that they fall into that we would need to look at. Right now, there's some unwritten rules that staff has just been following, such as community meetings get 2 hours free and, all these sorts of things. And we should look at some other parameters where maybe we can have the 2 hours during certain hours of the day and certain different times, so it won't be necessarily a cost to the residents of Annapolis.
Great. Thank you so much. I agree with that.
I guess I'm a little confused, and maybe I'm not. Maybe I realize that this is how we've been doing things. But when funds are collected, it goes in the general fund. So the general fund does know how much money comes from Recs and Parks. Am I correct?
Yes, but what she's saying is that it's not matched in the same place. We have all of our revenue counts over here and all of our departments over here, and we don't try to compare this to this. It's not an enterprise fund like utilities where we keep that separate.
Right, and I understand that. The way it looks now is that Recs and Parks is overspending their budget by a couple $100,000, when in actuality, the funds have come in but gone into the general fund and not been credited back to Recs and Parks. Am I seeing this correctly, or?
So as the general fund has many, many, many different revenue sources. One of those revenue sources are recreation fees. And those recreation fees are in a couple dozen accounts where we track the different type of revenue. And that revenue is partially supporting the activities of Rec and Parks. Just like the ambulance fees that we receive for doing ambulance trips partially supports the work of the fire department. The police have fees for some of their activities that partially supports their activities. And the same for planning and zoning, et cetera, et cetera. When there's fees established for something, we have the cost on the other side, and no department is completely supporting its activities. Rec and Parks is the largest example of that process, where they have numerous amounts of fees and numerous activities that they're trying to conduct with their operations, so it's very visible.
I think we should just be clear that this makes it appear as if Recs and Parks is not living within their budget, when in actuality, the funds are coming in and we're not identifying it as revenue.
Vicki Buckland, Assistant City Manager. So the way that I tend to think about that relationship, and I don't know if this is helpful or not, is that in some instances we deliberately make that tie. between revenue and expenditures in the enterprise funds, right? That's the sort of the definition of them. For other departments like Rec and Parks, there's an expectation in some ways of being held harmless for how much of those revenues come in. So for the sake of argument, let's say that that council decided to waive a series of fees or change the fee schedule in some ways, wanted to support particular programming that didn't have fees or whatever, right? You have a whole range of options that are in front of you. And so the department essentially is held harmless from either, in some ways, it cuts both ways. They get held harmless if fees are less than anticipated as part of the budget, but they also don't get the benefit if those fees are necessarily higher. And I think that speaks to what both Director Johnson and Director Dickinson were talking about, the need for analysis. Because at the end of the day, you end up wanting to make some decisions about where do we really want things to be, given that year to year there's a little bit of variance because we hold harmless, but that does in fact cut both ways. And so I think when it comes time for budgeting next year, part of what I'm hearing is a desire on the part of both of them to really take a look at what that relationship has been historically and see if there's some truing up that needs to happen. Is that fair?
Yes, that's accurate.
I think a couple of years ago, when Ms. Jennings was with us, in one of the presentations, a question was asked about the free events, the partnerships that we have. And she shared with us that while her budget looked like it was way over budget, the reality was that so many of her programs were free programs that we were giving gratis to the community, and community dollars, we're not really giving them. But so that changed the discussion, and that's what I'm trying to get at here. It's not that Recs and Parks is overspending their budget. The funds are coming in, and we just have to be able to marry the funds with the expenses. So that's what I just want to be clear about.
Director Johnson, do you have enough detail here so that it will help you reevaluate fees for next year or the year after, I guess, at this point, because we already approved the fees for 2024? I mean, it just says Recs and Parks, Pip Moyer. I don't know, is that for just, is it the pool? I mean, it's staff. I mean, do you have the detail that doesn't show here?
Yes and no. So with Pip Moyer, that's a different scenario.
Okay.
We had a staff person that was transferred to us from another department to the tune of about $50,000. And so that funding wasn't necessarily transferred. So that's the reason for that overage. And I think Budget and Finance is working through that process to somewhat fix that. And the other piece are our full-time salaries were over at PIP. And so I think they're working through that process to figure out why it's over, because of course we as a department don't control the full-time salaries. And I think another was some payouts that had occurred that weren't necessarily anticipated.
And then to isolate the Stanton Center, what makes that kind of weird is that it is also a building that it's a property. We lease it. How does the lease? We have a list of leases that I assume is already included in.
Those revenue accounts are.
Oh, it's just that you just answered my question. It's only $1. Do we have that dollar covered? That's what I'm gonna.
Even if they were paying some substantial fee, it would be part of those Rec and Parks fees that we say are listed over here on this side.
Yeah.
And we try to make an estimate of what was going to come in.
Yeah.
But we're not trying to match it to expenses because we know traditionally there's expenses are going to be higher than revenues. We just don't know what that difference is.
So we don't pull it out like Gorman or anything. Okay. I have 3 questions specific.
We don't own Gorman, though.
No, I know, it's just a bad example. Harbor Master, it's a little bit confusing because I know last year we applauded the department because their fees covered their expenses. And it appears this year they didn't. She uses the explanation that there's more dock space.
Again.
So that requires, I assume, more supervision.
It's the same type of thing.
Thank you, Director Johnson.
It's the same type of thing that you see with the Rec and Parks programs. They've got more people using the dock. more revenues coming in. They have to hire more of their temporary seasonal people to monitor that dock space, so they need more hours on the staff side. That's part of the reason that she cited for the overspending, is that there's more dock space to manage. She's got to have people working more hours for that. So we have the increased cost, but we don't try to tie it directly to, here's all the money that's coming in for that particular space.
Yeah.
So that's the same.
It's the same optics that Alderwoman Finlayson addressed. Boards and commissions, who is that person?
So I won't say a name, but there's only, it used to be under boards and commissions, and now it's part of the mayor's office. That was our error, because it was in the same, it's in a different division in our general ledger, and it's a lot further down the list than the mayor's office, which is one of the first. And so when we were grouping up for the budget request, we did not go down and include that amount in the budget. So that amount was completely missing from the budget last year, and that was our error. We're trying to get that grouped into the mayor's office directly, but so far we haven't been able to get that switched over.
Okay. And my last question, City Attorney Michael Lyles, you're not getting off the hook. Come on up.
Did you find out who was the community?
She said she can't give a name.
Well, I will tell you, hold on.
It's in the budget. I mean,
I don't know. It's like,
all the names are supposed to be in the budget.
The Community Engagement Administrator?
that's how it reads, yes.
Okay, so that's the title that's not included, that used to be in boards and commissions. That was, I think, previously known as the African American Liaison.
So do we have an African-American liaison, or is it now
Well, no,
the
it's now, that title is called the Community Engagement Administrator, so the title that was omitted last year inadvertently is the Community Engagement Administrator.
Okay, which has nothing to do with the boards and commissions person.
Not anymore. They've grouped it and reorganized how they're addressing things, and they don't have a person that's a boards and commissions person anymore.
We have to keep up, I'm just saying.
Wait a minute, I'm confused.
We are not.
When I go into the mayor's office and look at the business cards, there is one that is identified as African American liaison, so put that aside, right? What, do you understand this? Who?
Well, I know, I
Isn't that
suspect.
Hillary?
No, that's Mr. Ajayi's job.
Oh, okay, something, okay,
Yeah.
closed session, okay, bye.
But I'm sorry, we have always had in our budget books that are open to the public, every employee by name.
No. We have
do you
a
know?
we have a position. We do not have names in our budget book.
Don't make me lug that book in here,
There's-
because I have,
no.
in the past, we have not recently, you're right.
We put names.
But,
Yeah, we were
well,
doing
we
that
did the
during
other,
meetings,
when we
yeah.
were going, but yes, when we did our budgets in the past, prior to your tenure, every single employee was listed in the budget book, every single employee.
How about if I ask if
Okay, so we have done that in the past. The newspaper has even picked up on it and printed the highest salaries in the newspaper. It's public information. Am I wrong, Mr. Lyles?
Mike Lyles, City Attorney, you are correct. There has been information provided to the newspaper when they inquire about salaries of employees. We have to provide that information. However, with the budget book and the council's responsibility over the budget, the information you receive that's proper and appropriate for you to receive is the money based on the title of, or the function, and not individual personnel. That would be inappropriate.
I will find one in your office, because I think the archives are there. But just because we've done it in the past doesn't mean it's how we're doing it now. But,
Mayors too.
so, I'm sorry, I called out a name, and I
too, so, okay.
I did too.
okay, on your list.
Mr. Lyles, I know last year we added an attorney, And my curiosity is, if I understand this correctly, it looks like you took staff money and used a consultant. And if that is actual, could you explain what you can explain about that?
Well, I'm not quite sure which category of consultancy. We've had a few this year, 22-23, for special projects. In addition, this year we had an overage related to expenditures to pay outside counsel for the Providence Point remanded decision, and the expediency with which that decision was expected meant that we had to pay whatever needed to be paid to get that out. Other than that, we have had some special projects, surveys, and other kinds of activities that were not originally in our budget, but we took on the task of doing it. We just tried to pay those folks for what they were doing for us that was requested by the administration.
And so you took that knowledge and well, wrong time to be asking this, but you took that knowledge and projected it into 2024.
That's right. And, you know, we're being sued a lot. So with respect to the question of self-insurance fund, there are some things that we can, and the actuary has some knowledge, but we have more knowledge because we know how the cases are figuring out, and we do change and adjust it. Hopefully we're able to adjust far enough in advance so you can kind of help, so you can kind of see where it's going. The actuary can pick up on increases the self-insurance fund. But with respect to our basic budget, the things that we do that are unexpected, that are unanticipated, this year happened more than have happened in the past. And so with that, we tried to create a special projects fund that was funded appropriately for all of those things that we couldn't anticipate that the administration saw fit to place in our task list.
Okay, somewhat related, but will you be updating the city council in a closed session in the near future on those cases that you referred to?
We'd be happy to anytime.
Okay. Any other questions on this? All righty. I'll accept a motion
For favorable.
for a favorable recommendation.
Was that a motion?
I can't make a motion.
I'll make a motion.
No, I thought I heard her.
I'll make a motion for a favorable recommendation to the city council.
I'll second it.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Lyles. We have a supplemental appropriation, which is the mayor's office. Oh, this one's pretty easy. It was a contribution to the Hillman Garage opening. And as my colleague Alderwoman Finlayson said, the party probably cost more than that, but we're not. I don't know. Is that what that's for?
So I can't speak to the total cost of the party. We did get a couple of contributions, and this one they wanted to handle, so the contribution was given to us, and then we were paying the expenses. So we need to increase the budget to accommodate those expenses. And I know there were some donations made, some contributions directly made to the party itself. So I don't know how all that worked out, but there are people on the mayor's staff that could give you more detail.
It was a good opening.
I was just thinking I should recuse myself just because I missed the party, you know, but I won't.
Do I have a motion for a favorable recommendation?
Madam Chair, I'll make a favorable recommendation to SA 3123.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's it for, that's it. That's it. We finished the agenda. Is there anything else for the good of the order? At this time, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here and your hard work.